Hi, I'm Adrienne Barbeau. You can find me on Instagram at Adrienne_Barbeau. And you are listening to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series.
Today we have a very special bonus episode with Timothy Wynn. Timothy's an audio description consumer, but more than that, he interfaces with broadcast affiliates and gets issues resolved and fixed, and I cannot wait to have this interview. Thanks so much for joining us, Timothy.
Thank you, Roy, for having me. Appreciate it.
Let's start off by asking what you love about audio description.
I only found out about audio description about 10 years ago, and what I found really amazing about it is how the writers and the narrators can work together to make a kind of a seamless script, which kind of gives the blind audience, or whoever uses audio description, doesn't have to be blind, but the audience member, the ability to enjoy whether it be a television show or a play or a movie, in a way that works really well, especially with there's so much going on visually that there's a way for it to sound concise, but at the same time give the information that the audience member can enjoy almost in the same way.
How did your role in audio description evolve from consumer to some of these other connections, specifically with the broadcast affiliates?
Well, back in 2010, which is when I first found out about audio description, the only channel that carried it was, to my knowledge, was CBS. And so I was able to tune into my local CBS affiliate, and everything actually was working somewhat okay. But then there was a day where the audio description didn't get passed through. And so I heard no audio description whatsoever. So then I started figuring out how to contact my local affiliate, and we started a dialogue. And then from there on, I started emailing people like my CBS affiliate in like 2011. And it went from there. And that's how I first received audio description from PBS. It wasn't enabled at all until I emailed my local affiliate, and they're like, hey, we just added it on and now it works. And so then it did. So in 2012, when the CVAA's mandate for audio description was reinstated, I had audio description on ABC, NBC, and Fox. And with all those three affiliates, each one of them had their own issues. And so for ABC, I actually worked a lot with the engineers to get audio description to switch back in time, so that after a commercial break or after a local break, it would usually take a couple of 30 seconds to a minute to kind of switch back to audio description. And so it would kind of, we would lose some of the audio. And so I worked a lot with the ABC affiliate. And then of course with Fox, the same thing. They actually weren't actually transmitting audio description at all. The second that audio description was switched to, the feed would actually break and the TV channel would actually break the audio track itself. And so I had to work with them. And same thing with NBC. They all have different systems of switching to audio description. So basically I just worked with each and every one of them to kind of fine tune it and get everything working the way it should. And also to keep in mind that the affiliates also have their own needs that they have to prioritize as well. And so working with those affiliates, I was able to kind of get everything best of both worlds for both affiliate and consumer.
Wow. It's so great to hear this perspective on the pass-through side, that a lot of our conversations obviously have been with narrators and other decision makers, but you're addressing something that even when the affiliates had it, there were still some system issues that needed to be tweaked. And I got to tell you, even going back further, what you said about the dialogue that you had with these, that tells me that it was a relationship. It's not just like pass this information on to the manager. Did you have a relationship that kept building with these affiliates as the problems kept getting solved?
I did for 3 out of 4. So with ABC, CBS, and NBC, they all were willing to dialogue and everything else. It depends on the affiliate, but Fox, they just passed my comments on to whoever the engineer was at the time. And so they just, they weren't the engineers that I were interfacing with. It was like the general manager or something like that. And so they just passed my comments along. But the other 3 networks, they actually reached out to me and said, can we, talk on the phone, or can we talk about how we can better serve? And so they actually were the ones to start the dialogue. And well, I started the dialogue, but they continued it on. And so we have a really good relationship. So right now I can actually contact some of the engineers directly. And so they can resolve issues really quickly.
Wow, that's great. Do you see that what you're doing could be modeled in other affiliates?
I believe so. I mean, if the engineers are willing to dialogue with the consumer who is having the audio description issue, and if the consumer is willing to understand that it's not only that the affiliate has the issue, but it could be an issue with, say, the cable network or the cable provider. And so there are, extenuating circumstances that might break audio description for certain reasons. And so if they're willing to listen to each other and instead of just demanding, then, it can be a really good relationship and everyone can benefit from it.
Wow. Oh, that's great to hear. I got such a smile on my face right now hearing how all these conversations are happening. Do you have a favorite example that you can share specifically within that world of pass-through?
Sure. So in 2016, I would think about December is when the mandate for passing through emergency broadcast information was mandated for all affiliates, no matter whether they are part of the top 60 markets or not. And so they had to pass the emergency broadcast information through. So basically, when you get a weather alert or something, the text that scrolls on the bottom of the screen has to be read out through a text-to-speech or in other ways. And so somehow that actually broke 3 out of the 4 systems in my local area. And so I actually had to work with ABC and ask them, okay, somehow it's not switching back to audio description. It keeps on reading the text-to-speech over and over and over for like 30 minutes. And so they were to figure that out and how to figure that out. And they resolved it in, I think, less than a few days. And the same with NBC. The audio description was only going through the left channel and the right channel had regular audio. And I think some things broke at that time too, where they could not air audio description when they're time-shifting material. And so basically, say you were airing a program at 8, but because of local programming and stuff, you're airing it tomorrow at noon because you're time shifting it. The audio description will not get passed through because the recording facility that they were using did not pass it through. And so they were able to work with me, and now everything is being passed through no matter what happens.
That's great. Oh, what a satisfying story, especially with the access and the annoyance of having that text-to-speech over and over again.
And they weren't aware of it because some things just happen to pop up. And so sometimes it's not that the affiliate is willfully trying to not pass through audio description. It's just they don't know about the issue until someone says something to them.
Wow, what a great point. So let's transition from broadcast to streaming services. Are there any similarities or differences in your experience between streaming services and broadcast?
I would like to talk about it from 2 perspectives. And the first perspective would be from the consumer end, right? The consumer, as a viewer of television or movies or what have you, we would want the audio description track always to be available no matter what service we're using. Because if it's already produced and it's already mixed, there shouldn't be any reason why the audio description should not be included in any on-demand platform, whether we're talking about Hulu, Netflix, or even ABC or CBS's on-demand system. The issue then becomes, okay, so then if we're supposed to have it, why isn't it getting passed through? Well, I would like to talk about the perspective of the streaming provider. Many times, the streaming provider would love to pass through audio description, but then there are cases like, for example, with Netflix back in 2015, where they were not able to pass through any secondary audio tracks of any kind. They were not able to switch audio tracks, and they had to rewrite some of the code to get that as an option, so that whether you're speaking in another language or whether you're requiring audio description, now you can just switch over to a different audio track independent of the video track. It requires changes on the infrastructure. You might have the files and you may be able to stream it, but you may not be able to stream it and allow users to choose which tracks they want to hear. And so that becomes an issue. So how do you resolve that, right? And so Netflix and now Hulu is able to stream audio tracks independently of the video track. And same thing with the closed captioning. Certain broadcast networks are able to stream the audio tracks, whether we're talking about secondary audio of audio description or whether we're talking about secondary audio through Spanish dubbing or what have you. CBS can do that, and ABC sort of can do that, but not as an option to the consumer.
Wow, so complicated. And it seems like each streaming service has their own way of doing things.
Yes. For Netflix and Hulu, I think it'd be a little easier for them to make changes to their player, because the player is what the user gets to see, right? And you get to have options and settings and that stuff. But some broadcasters, they use a third-party player. And so when that happens, how can you allow access for consumers to switch between audio tracks? You have to tell the third-party player to make changes in their code. And sometimes that's not something that can be feasibly done. or maybe the third-party player may not know how to do that accessibly. I don't know, right? And so it's not as easy as just toggling a switch and then everything just works like it should.
I was just thinking it sounds so complicated, this all the different elements that have to come together. And we haven't even started talking about making sure everything's in sync or whether the connection is still there. It's really fascinating.
Definitely. And I think not to defend the streaming providers because it looks like I'm doing that a lot, but there are things I would like to see from the streaming providers as well. And we can talk about that a little bit as we get on with this
Let's
interview.
talk about it now. That's exciting.
Okay. So there are a couple things I'd like to see from the provider. The streaming providers usually get audio tracks and captioning tracks and such. Usually that is done almost for the most part post-production or close to it, right? And so if, for example, I'm watching Disney Plus and I'm watching Frozen, I would like to see that no matter what region I'm in, I get to see all the languages that you guys have, whether it be English, whether it be Spanish, whether it be Vietnamese or what have you. And the same thing with audio description tracks. If an audio description track is produced in the US and there's a different track in the UK, I would like to be able, as a consumer, to choose between those tracks and watch it as I want to. Because you're limited to a certain amount of words you can say before the dialogue cuts you off or what have you. And so audio description and getting it from different providers would be a great asset for consumers to be able to watch and see things and enjoy things differently. And so right now, for example, I'm watching Disney Plus because I'm using them as an example. I can't watch Frozen with Vietnamese dubbing. And I know that exists because I know people who are in Vietnam who watched it with Vietnamese dubbing. And so it's an issue of region copyright that I guess is really unneeded nowadays because streaming is worldwide. And so, yeah, maybe a program is available only in the US, but if the audio tracks are made available for any other languages, then it should be made available no matter where you are. And so that's one of the issues I've had. And that carries through with audio description as well, because sometimes an audio description track is available on Netflix, for example. But if you watch that same program on, say, CBS or say any other broadcasting streaming service or what have you, the audio description track isn't there. And so we want parity with everyone else. If a sighted person can watch NCIS on any platform they want to, the blind or visually impaired person or anyone who's using audio description should be able to do the same.
I'm thinking about a TV show that has a guest star who's a female in the United States, and then if it went to Europe, there's no way that would be replaced by a male co-star. The co-star would go with the production. That it's almost ridiculous that would be replaced. And it seems like there might be a comparison here, or am I making too big of a stretch?
I would say so, because the only difference between a different country's catalog is that the title, of course, but also the other difference would be the playback speed, right? And so maybe you're doing at 25 frames per second versus 24, right? And those are just random numbers. They're not exact as they should be. In the same way, so if I watch something in the US and it has US audio description, if I go over to the UK, I expect the track should be still there. And so there should be no regional difference, no matter where you are, as far as audio tracks or captioning tracks or anything like that. It really shouldn't be that way.
Where are some other places you'd like to see audio description go if you were to have your dream world?
Honestly, parody. If I'm watching something on ABC, if I'm watching it through the TV, I'd like audio description to be there. And thank goodness nowadays that is the case for a lot of the affiliates, no matter what market share you're in. And if not, then it's just an email away. And if the affiliate is willing to dialogue with you, you can get that to happen, right? But then if I'm watching it on streaming service, then the only way I can watch audio description is through the ABC streaming platform. I cannot watch it through Netflix or Hulu or any of the other platforms that may have the title, like Prime Video. The audio description track isn't passed through. And so I would love it that if there's an audio description track, whether we're talking about in the US, the UK, or Canada, because the UK and Canada, they have a way higher output of audio description than we do here in the US. I would like to be able to have that track and access to it and watch the same thing as anyone else.
Timothy, with your efforts on your own experience as a consumer, how do you find other examples where you can help facilitate conversations, either the affiliates or the streaming services? How do you find your information?
Well, I would like to talk more on the affiliate side because I have more experience with that. A lot of the affiliates are thinking that audio description is a really cumbersome thing to pass through. because they think that they would have to provide the tracks themselves, or they don't know how audio description is being passed through, whether it's by the network, whether it's by its local affiliate, or what have you. And so they think it's a cumbersome and hard thing to do. But if they are required to pass through the emergency broadcast information, they already have a secondary audio track that's available to pass through audio description. And so all they need to do is contact the network and get the assets from the network, and then it gets passed through. So it really isn't really complicated or burdensome process. Because I know some affiliates refuse to do it because they're not required to do it. It's not mandated for them because they're not in the top 60, therefore they don't have to do it. But if they are able to do it, if they have the technical ability to do it, I would love it that they would understand that audio description comes from the network. It is not through something that you have to pay for. It is just received by the network just as you receive any other content, whether we're talking about closed captioning or we're talking about a program like NCIS or, Law and Order, what have you. You receive that as a package or you receive it as a stream to the network themselves, and the audio description track just comes with it. And so you just need to pass that through. And so if we can get that to happen, and instead of just rely on mandate, it needs to be something that you're willing to dialogue about. And maybe you can't pass it through, but if you're just going to close the dialogue off as we don't have to, so we're not going to, then it kind of just ruins the experience for everyone.
And it sounds like that experience when it's not passed through is based on assumptions. And can you name an example of maybe one time when you were corresponding with an affiliate where the light bulb finally went off and they got it? In other words, they understood it?
Can I say no? Because I have contacted other affiliates in other states on behalf of a consumer before, and either there would be no response or they would tell me that they don't have to, so they're not going to look into it.
Wow.
I don't know how to answer that in a way that's more palatable.
That goes back to what you had said about the parity, that in the Dream Timothy Wynn world, that there is parity and that this wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, definitely. On the other hand, though, consumer education is also important. For example, I contacted an affiliate who was passing through all 4 networks through that one affiliate, and they were actually passing through audio description. When I called them up and I talked to the engineer, they said, hey, we're passing it through. But the consumer is unable to access audio description, whether because the TV interface isn't accessible or other reasons. They were not able to access audio description even though it was there. And so education is important both on the affiliate side as well as consumers or any other entity that you're dealing with or you're dialoguing with.
And it sounds like as consumers speak up for what they want, whether it's parity or other needs, that that's the way that things can happen.
Definitely. Is we willing to listen to the other party and compromise if needs be? And if not, then, just be able to hear where they're coming from and see where we can find common ground.
Is there anything in the next year that you're specifically looking forward to in the world of audio description?
I would like to see more streaming services come out on the get-go with audio description. That would be something amazing to see, because if a sighted person can watch something on the first day and enjoy it with captioning or enjoy it in HD and 4K and all that, then I would like to be able to enjoy the same experience. I would like to be able to sign up to a service, pay for you monthly, and enjoy every second of it, right? Mm-hmm. And that includes not only audio description pass-through or having audio description tracks, but that also includes the viewing experience. If I can't access your service accessibly with my screen reader or whatever accessive technology I'm using, then even if you do have audio description, it's not going to be a really fun experience or an enjoyable experience or even an accessible experience, if you want to call it that.
Do you have any social media handles that you'd like to share?
Sure. I'm on Twitter at TWin92. That's Tango Whiskey Yankee November 92. I'm not an active tweeter, but I am pretty much engaged in the conversation around audio description, technology, screen readers, and all sorts of things. So, yeah.
Oh, thanks again so much, Timothy. This has been so informative and so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.